Weirdly, I thought this would be quite an easy thing to do, particularly considering the things that brought this campaign about and all of the difficult processes that I've been through. But I just have to tell you all, I'm more terrified about this evening than anything else that I've done. I think you know you're all here for one reason, really, which is to learn a little bit about the campaign and the abuse of non-disclosure agreements. We're not going to give you a legal lecture. We're not going to bore you about it. But I do recommend that everybody does go and have a look at our website afterwards and learn a little bit about it, because most people who haven't come across an NDA thinks it only happens to people in Hollywood or in big business, and this is not the case. We're all vulnerable to being silenced, and it is actually more pervasive now than when I signed my agreement in 1998. Having your voice taken away from you is possibly the biggest human rights and emotional and psychological abuse that can happen to you. And with an NDA, that is for the rest of your life. So you can never share your trauma, never warn anybody else about somebody dangerous or malpractice. And for this reason, it's a very simple moral choice to stop NDAs being a legally enforceable part of the powerful toolkit. So the other main reason you're here is to help. You have an opportunity here to help my co-founder and I, Julie McFarlane, who started this campaign with me a year ago. She's here in the yellow t-shirt. I encourage everybody to go and speak to her. She will give you a legal lecture, but that's what you need. A really interesting one. But the two of us have been working for a year at our kitchen tables, 5,000 miles apart. This is only the third time we've ever met. And we've already changed the law. We have legislation that is in law, in action in Canada, about to go forward in 2 more provinces in Canada, about to go forward in Ireland. And if our government could pull itself together, we might have a hope of having it through here. Now, I want to raise 100 grand tonight. I know that might sound a little bit unrealistic and idealistic, but if 2 women who don't even know each other in less than a year can change the law with no money, imagine what we can do if we have a little bit of help. Also, I'd really like my life back. And so if we could employ some people to help us, and if you can't give money, maybe you could come help us. But I need to get this wrapped up in 18 months because I'd like to get my life back. And I'd also like to give the voice back to all the people who have been silenced and who are still being silenced every single day. Julie and I are contacted by people on a daily basis, from people you know, you admire, companies that you use, and they are still doing this. So please give generously. Please talk to other people about this, and let's just get this done. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It is ludicrously hard to step in off the back of such an extraordinary, poignant, moving piece of work and throw you straight into discussing the issues. I feel slightly guilty, and I'm conscious that you will want to let things sink in and consider what you've seen and heard and piece together the work of Jodie Cantor and Megan Twohey, and to understand what the women portrayed in that film have been carrying with them for years, if not for life. But having said that, the panel that we have here is such a unique, strange, and frankly wonderful combination of the fiction of that film and fact. We have Samantha Morton, who played Zelda Perkins. We have Rebecca Lenkiewicz, who wrote the script. And we have Laura Madden, who may or may not have first met the film crew on that beach in Ireland at the very beginning, but whose life was altered forever in ways both extraordinary and terrible by her own encounter with the Hollywood predator and the film crew. This is not a film about Harvey Weinstein. It's about the women who survived him and what they did with their voices and their knowledge and their sense of urgent responsibility to other women right around the world. And so tonight, we're going to discuss the film, but also the wider issues it raises about silence, about silencing, about payoffs, about NDAs, the system that works to protect the predators and not the whistleblowers. And we're going to ask if anything has changed since the Me Too movement, since those events that were portrayed happened. And I'd like to start with the woman who's pieced it all together, Rebecca, and woven, I suppose, the fact and the fiction. And I'm thinking, Rebecca, that when you're dealing with such vulnerability, there must be real pressure to sort of not bring in too much drama or too many sort of inventions of the imagination, but maybe that's not right.
No, absolutely. You feel honour bound to tell the truth and the whole truth. And I met with Laura and I met with Rowena Chu and I met with Zelda, and each of them were so impressive. And the task is huge in that it's about many, many women outside of the film too. You know, it's not just about Hollywood. It's a problem that stems from everyday sexism to rape. And you want women and everyone to feel the injustice, but also to feel some sense of solidarity. So it was a challenge.
And did you want to bring in the actresses themselves who had been in that story? Was that an important thing for you?
Yeah, I felt very much... I mean, I started writing it before the book was finished, so I had a few weeks where it was just sort of like free fall, perhaps 6 weeks, where I was just having images of sort of women in my head. I'd done a lot of research and met the journalists, but it was kind of like, to me, I felt like it wanted to be obviously so incredibly female. And then when I got the chapters through from the journalists and I read Ashley Judd's information and how she was, I kind of very much saw her in it. I thought she would want to be a part of it. And all the other actresses involved were asked if they wanted to be involved. And several survivors were cast in the film, playing other parts. You know, so there were... Gwyneth Paltrow, it was her own voice. And Lauren O'Connor, very movingly, reads her own memo. And, you know, of course, these are such complicated tasks to perform, you know, for Lauren and, you know, for everyone in it to recount what happened. And I would just salute their bravery. So, yeah, I was very, very glad.
And with Ashley, I mean, was there a moment where she was considering whether she wouldn't do it? Was that an extra step for her outside that of the acting role?
I think from the start, obviously everyone was very tentative because you want to be part of something that's authentic, and film is infamous for not being authentic. So I think we had to gain their trust with the script and with talks. But Ashley was pretty enthused from the start, I think, yeah.
And Samantha, you walked in just to that one scene, absolutely pivotal scene. But what made you take a relatively small... I mean, you know, it was pivotal, but it was a cameo.
Zelda. I think when I got the email from Dee Dee asking if I'd do it, I just saw Zelda. Yes, I'll do it. Yeah. So that was that. And the reason is because everything Zelda's done, everything Zelda stands for, is something that it was an honour to play Zelda, say her words, and it's a subject matter that I feel incredibly passionate about. Not passionate's the wrong word. It's like a lifeblood, injustice, and I had a different history with Harvey. So it just felt like, fuck yeah, let's fucking do it.
And did you know you knew Zelda's story inside out?
Yeah.
You knew.
Well, not Inside Out. No, we had to. I wanted to speak to Zelda, really speak to Zelda. We tried to meet, but it was tricky. COVID and everything, it was tricky. But we'd met in the past actually. So, yeah.
And Zelda, you were never tempted. You wouldn't have You wouldn't have felt the need to act you in there.
I'm not a union member, so they wouldn't have allowed me, even if I'd wanted to. No, to be honest, I would have been very happy for the film to have not included me. It's a very uncomfortable experience to be part of your real life experience becoming a story. But I think the importance of the film and the message that the film is imparting is way above any of our own personal sensitivities. And that was, that's something Laura and I talked about a lot, is, where you place your ego amongst all of this.
Was it easy to let go? I mean, did you talk to her? No.
No, it wasn't easy at all. And I think it was probably harder for Laura and I particularly, because we were very experienced in the
world of film.
The world of film, and what happens to a story when it becomes developed. It gets developed, it goes through a team of people. And, how you get the narrative arc in a story that will make it a commercial story. And I think that's one of the issues nowadays where films, this film has come out very quickly on the back of a real life story. And you look at something like The Crown now, which is also dealing with people who are real live people, and it's an interesting position to be in, and for me, very in a mercenary way. For me, the most important thing about this film is that people get to understand about the damage of being silenced, and if that message, personally for me, there are many important messages in that film, but for my focus, and for the focus of my co-founder, Julie, that's the most important thing that comes out of that. And, whether it's 100% truthful or not is not so relevant.
Laura, whilst we're trying to piece together as an audience, that where fact and fiction weave, that phone call that you take, the home phone, and you sort of pull it off and the kids are sort of in the background, is the moment that changes your mind, that pushes you to say, fuck this, I'm gonna say exactly what I want. It's the moment you decide to use your voice. And that call came to you. That actually happened.
Out of the blue, I got a phone call from Pamela. And I mean, this is not the defining scene of my life, having an assault, being assaulted by Harvey. So it came completely out of the blue, decades after it had happened. And I mean, it was just a shocking thing to hear somebody ask you to not speak about, your time with a man who has bullied you and assaulted you. So she did it had the reverse effect that it should have had. It totally inspired me to speak out. Yeah. So note to anyone who has a plan to try and silence you. Don't listen. It could go awfully wrong.
Just develop that a bit more for us, because it sounded like, in the film it was just one call. I don't know if it was more than one, but in real life you were getting, I think you called it coercion, flattery and fear, the sort of trifecta of all the different emotions to make you shut up.
Yes, so it started as a kind of friendly conversation, and very quickly she asked if I was speaking to any journalists, and I hadn't spoken to a journalist, I hadn't heard from any journalists, and I became immediately suspicious, and so I sort of said to her, no, and if any call me, I will, I'm not going to keep Harvey's secrets. And she was frightened, and so she rang me back about 2 days later saying, is there anything you need? I mean, you're going through a divorce. Do you need a divorce lawyer? I'm like, no. What about a script? Have you any scripts? And it was sort of desperate. And then she said, do I need an oncologist? Because she heard I'd had cancer.
Yeah.
So it was just this endless list of attempts to try and reel me into keep, whatever she wanted me to do.
And from the title of the film and to where we are now, it's all about words and language and what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And I think we should talk about the NDAs. You were never presented with an NDA. You never had to make a choice.
I'd never heard of an NDA.
Yeah.
I had no idea that they existed. And I was never asked to sign one. It wasn't actually until sort of months into talking to Jodie Cantor when she rang me and she said she had something to tell me. She had something in confidence she wanted to tell me. And she said, do you realise that there are settlements? And I was like, no. And she said, I think she must have realised that I hadn't signed one and that maybe would help me find the courage to go on the record because I wasn't silenced in that way.
I mean, that, I'm going to make you sort of horrified, but that changed history, actually. The fact that you hadn't signed an NDA changed the history for their book, for this film, for the Me Too movement, and for everything that's happened since then, which I think speaks volumes to you, that you never signed and you never did, but also to the power that the NDA has, that it wanted to silence so much.
Yes, I mean, it was like a light bulb moment for me. I was suddenly like, okay, so I didn't sign anything. I have a duty to speak because there are so many women who just can't. And I'm lucky. I don't have that added layer of fear.
And Zelda, you were one of those women. When I first met you, you had been behind the wall, and it was an imprisonment, really, for 19 years.
23.
23. Okay, 23. And I think you had made that choice to speak out because you had become aware that it was being used systemically, right, as a way of covering up criminal activity. I wonder if you, and I know this is frustrating for you because everyone says, yay, Weinstein's in prison, great, it's all over, right? The bunting's out. And you're talking about the way the system just perpetuates the cover-up of criminal activity and doesn't let the whistleblower, somebody who wants to be a whistleblower, speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we spoke 5 years ago now, I'm still saying exactly the same things. And yes, I'm very pleased that justice has been served and that Harvey is in jail. And that was a huge win that the courts did the right thing. Because my experience with the law, which was really why, that really was my trauma. The trauma was discovering that when we went to the law did not protect us. The law only protected the person with power. And that's still the case. Nothing has changed in UK law. Nothing, not one thing, since the day I signed that agreement. And the only things that have changed are whistleblowing laws, so there is a little bit more protection. But my agreement could still be made today. Agreements like mine are still being made today. And these agreements don't just apply to sexual harassment. They don't just apply to huge monsters and predators. They apply to poor surgeons, to builders who put up flammable cladding, to gambling rings, to anything where the reputation of a company or an individual is put at risk. Now, I don't understand, and I don't even understand why I still have to explain or ask the question, why in our culture we have a legally enforceable agreement that protects and hides abuse and harm. I mean, does that make sense on any level? And that hasn't been changed. The government were very behind this when I first spoke out, and there was the select committee inquiries. But since then, we've had a leadership change once or twice. And, you know, there has been no progress. And it's low-hanging fruit. This is an easy thing for...
So who are there legislators that are behind this? I mean, are you finding people that are ready to get these changes made?
Globally, yes. In the UK, it's a pretty poor showing. I mean, we do have supporters. Jess Phillips is a huge supporter. Maria Miller is a huge supporter. We have cross-party support, but there is very little leverage within government at the moment. But globally, I mean, certainly the work that Julie and I have been doing has been particularly successful in Canada because of the rocket I have here. We developed a bill in Ireland with a fantastic senator called Senator Lynn Ruane, and that bill has become essentially a global model for stopping the misuse of NDAs, and not just around sexual harassment.
I mean, normally, you know, in my world, in the world of politics, things change when they become too shaming not to. You know, quite often we've seen this with, you know, Marcus Rashford and school meals for kids and all the rest of it. It's not that anyone suddenly thinks it's a great idea when they thought it was a bad idea. They just go, I have been shamed into doing this. It's very interesting that we're in a place where, despite everything that we've seen and everything that you brought forward, and the fact that, yeah, he's only one monster, but he is a monster and he is in jail, they haven't made that connection. I mean, is it just, do you see it as vested interests? Is it just down to vested interests, or is it just not top of the pile?
No, it is vested interest, and I mean, it is how the power dynamic has traditionally worked. And so taking that toy away is quite a difficult thing to do. I mean, right from the beginning, our strategy was to try and shame the government into doing something. And, you know, the reason that Julie and I really came together was that we knew that currently in the UK climate, there wasn't very much we could do. So we had to make this broader. We had to make it global. And in fact, yesterday in the US, you know, a bill has been passed to stop the misuse of NDAs, to stop NDAs around sexual harassment. You know, signed by President Biden. This is, you know, and the UK is still behind.
Yeah, we have to. It's true. We have to clap and applaud every achievement, even though they feel glacial sometimes in terms of the pace.
They feel glacial here,
yeah.
but I think the movement is happening, the change is happening, and I think if it wasn't for our total chaos, you know, political chaos, we would have moved much faster. Yeah. And, you know, and that's one of the reasons why tonight's so important, because for Julie and I to push this across the line, we really need help. We need physical help, we need mental help, and we need financial help.
Sam, if you were on a film set today, would it feel very different to the film set run by the Weinsteins of this world?
No. Not at all. There's a tiny bit on the call sheet now, if you search for it through the pages and pages. I don't know how many people here tonight work in film, but if you do, you'll know what I'm talking about. It will say, if you are, certainly in the UK, if you're experiencing bullying or inappropriate behaviour, this is a number you can call, and there's a charity helpline. But we don't really have a code of conduct. Anyone can be in the film industry, really. You can be a football agent and then suddenly, you know, get a TikTok star and then go to Sky and get 50 million to make 10 films. You've got no training in the film industry. It's the Wild West still. However, on The Walking Dead, what was really lovely, I was like my second day in rehearsal, I got a phone call from somebody from AMC saying, we take this incredibly seriously. This is a number. If you do see anything that is, you know, within the realms of what we're talking about, or bullying or anything, please call us. And you'll be, you know, and that felt really good. Right. And I think to me, it was different in America. I found that American film sets, whether it's to do with the unions, are stronger there. Our unions, Equity and Bec 2, are not as strong as SAG-AFTRA. They're just not, for many, many reasons. And I think that for me, I do find it as an actor on an American film set that there's a different, maybe because of the unionisation, it's just a little bit different. But the answer to your question, Emily, not at all.
And when you see behaviour that doesn't feel right or comfortable or legit, do you feel able to call it out?
Well, I do, and I'm considered in the UK, not in America. I seem to work better in America and they like me more. I'm considered difficult here. And it's because I grew up in care and I grew up fighting the system from the inside out. And so when I see injustice within a hierarchy on set, I can't help but to go to my agent or go to my lawyer or go to someone and say, this isn't okay, or whether it's bullying, or it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're an actor, a famous actor, or a runner, or whatever. It's just, there's just not enough training. That's the problem, I think, as well.
So, okay, it's interesting you say it's about training rather than abuse of power.
There's both. There's training of people. It's a mostly male industry, so there's training of how sparks or people might conduct themselves. I did a TV show called Harlots for 3 years where I played a woman who ran a brothel, and I saw behaviour on that set that was absolutely unacceptable. And the minute I called it out to the brilliant female producers, it was dealt with immediately. Because it wasn't just me, there was multiple women saying, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. It's dealt with immediately. But I think we still work in an industry that... and no disrespect. Why do I feel the need to say no disrespect to the men in the audience? But I do. I don't know why. But the old guard is still knocking about. I'm working with directors who still think it's okay to say to a woman, "Can you hold your tummy in? I can't see her nipples properly." Or unbelievable things, Emily, that they think is appropriate because they're powerful men who've been directing for a very long time, very, very long time. And they're okay to do what they want, and no one says anything because they're the director, and it's unbelievable.
We are going to open this up to questions for the last few moments, but so I don't know, have we got a sort of roving mics, or are people...
I'm going to jump in for 1 second.
Yeah, I'm not going to...
Whilst the mics come out.
Just checking that's right. But I want you to tell me the thing. Yeah, you can jump in, but I just want you to tell me something that really shocked me when we were outside, which is the number of rehearsals that happen in directors' hotel rooms.
Yeah, you get very famous directors often want to meet still in their hotel rooms or do rehearsals in their hotels.
that was the Weinstein story, wasn't it? That he'd appear in his
it's that thing about privacy, and people want their privacy, and people that's what they want. They want to be comfortable. I had rehearsals for a movie once where the director was in his boxer shorts. Yeah, actual rehearsal. Yeah. It was me going in, and he's sitting there in his boxer shorts. I went, same. Got to keep moving on.
No, I want you to talk, but I don't want you to relive stuff that is really.
It's triggering, but it's all triggering, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to play Zelda, because I'd been through things as a child and as a young person, and as an adult that were abhorrent, and this is my way of being involved, giving something back, and also to protect Zelda's voice, because there are lots of actresses out there, and that some are very good, and some maybe don't have a connection to what I have a connection to. So there's a bit of truth coming through when I play Zelda.
And just before I bring Zelda in again, can I just ask Rebecca? One of the most sort of powerful scenes in the film is one that you've almost left untouched, which is a real audio recording between Ambra Gutierrez and Weinstein, and you just leave us in the corridor with debris and dark lights. And I mean, you knew you just wanted to play that almost like newsreel, right?
Yeah, I did. And in an earlier draft of the script, right at the beginning of the movie, there was the full tape, Hollywood access tape of Trump saying, grab him by the pussy. So it sort of started with that, and then in the middle there's Weinstein. And I just thought it was very important to witness in reality, the force, the terrifying force, and the tactics and the unstoppable, because there are certain facts that people, throw out, like why go to a hotel room? The hotel room was a place of work,
Completely, yeah.
I just want to say one thing to the space. Men were afraid of Harvey, petrified of him. Very, very powerful men. Just want to put that out there.
He was also nastier to men often than he was to women. Just in sort of meetings, in sort of public spaces, men were treated much worse than women were.
Because that was the alpha, sort of, was it alpha to beta? So I'm really you said you wanted to jump in. I don't want it to be another 23 years. Please, please speak.
But there's no fear of that. No, I wanted to pick up on talking about the changes that are happening. And although what Sam is saying is absolutely true, and I tend to always be the slightly negative voice in terms of there's been no change and we're still in this terrible mess, but there are incredible changes happening too. And those changes are not coming from the establishment, they are coming from activism. Right. And one of the groups that have made this night possible, which is Time's Up, and the support that they've given me and what the work they're doing now is one of the major developments, particularly in the UK, where they're starting an independent standards authority, which will give people in the entertainment industry a place, an independent place to go to complain. Right. And the fact that that has never existed before in itself is extraordinary.
And that the unions weren't that place.
No.
Right.
And I think, again, one of the things that I just want to make really clear to people is that if you want to be part of making a change, it is these small groups, these groups of people who are desperately fighting to make the changes. That's where it's happening. That's where you can make change. And we're the ones, you know, bugging the establishment, but we are the ones who are going to make it happen. Julie and I both believe that the only way to really make a change is through legislation and through regulation. My NDA, which I think most people don't know a huge amount about, but we will understand what an NDA is, but my NDA, I was never allowed to actually see or hold. I also wasn't even allowed to show that NDA or get my lawyer to show that NDA to another lawyer to see if it was enforceable or legally binding. So that's how it kind of works within the in the legal world. It's a completely Kafkaesque, you know, Wild West, really. And anything can be put in an NDA because nobody can check it. And because they're secret, nobody can talk about it. So it's completely the emperor's new clothes. And ultimately, there's no point in fighting with lawyers about it. They work for lawyers. They've become standard. They're a useful tool. The only way that we can stop them is by stopping them in law.
My hope is that a lot of young people will see this film, and there is a huge question there about Hollywood making such a film, but I think that it needed to be made, and I think there's so much detail in the film, and even more detail in the book, and even more detail in everyone's lives, you know, that that people need to know. And so my personal take on it was that it was very much a film about being tribal and being woman and the very many different experiences of women. You know, I've experienced sexual violence, so have people in my family, so have many close friends. You know, it's not something that is miles away. You know, if you asked anyone in this cinema, you know, it's everywhere. So I think that the conversation is very limited about it, and I think shaming women is prevalent. And so my impulse to do this, although you could have more purity in a Granta magazine, you know, there's not going to be so many people seeing that, and there's not going to be so many conversations. So I think that this helps break silence.
That's a very good question, and it's not a very well documented answer that I can give you. I don't know how many cases there are of people who have broken their NDAs, but in the last few years, certainly since I broke mine, and Julie and I have worked with a couple of people who've broken NDAs in this year, there have been no recriminations. We recently had a TSSA union member, which is the transport union, who broke her NDA, and the union tried to superinjunct her, but the court threw the superinjunction out because there is a difference now in attitude towards upholding an agreement that is essentially hiding criminal or abusive behaviour, and that's how it should be. And that change is beginning to happen. We can't advise people to break their NDAs, but frankly, Julie and my fantasy is that we have a 1st of April where everybody stands up and breaks their NDA, and I can guarantee that only 1% of those people might receive recriminations. But the truth is that there isn't really record, because it's a very rare thing. But the reality is that the reason anybody wants somebody to sign an NDA is because they don't want the information in the public domain. So if somebody breaks that NDA, actually the best thing they can do is not go after them and keep quiet, because they don't want to amplify the issue. And that is something that is now, you know, happening much more.
So when you decided to, I mean, there are other ways that you can be intimidated, presumably threats and humiliation and the kind of stuff that, you know, the phone call from, was it Pamela or whatever, might have involved. Were you conscious that you could bring a whole lot more dirt onto yourself when you thought about breaking it?
Absolutely, but I'd had 23 years of something more painful, which was not being able to speak. And I think when I was 24 and I was told that if I tried to force the action against Weinstein, every family member, every friend, every penny that anybody had who was associated with me would be in danger. You know, that was what was more powerful. And I think part of the reason it was possible for me to speak, and I think both Laura and I, even though Laura hadn't signed an NDA, I think we were both at a kind of point in our life where speaking the truth was more important. I didn't have any dependents whose lives would have been ruined if I had been sued or sent to jail or any of the things that I thought might happen. Laura had young girls who she wanted to show how important it was. So we were at, you know, a more mature point in our life where the value of speaking up was clearly bigger than the fear of any continued abuse.
Let's take the last...
And it didn't make it into the edit, but, you know, there were details about how they forced, basically, you know, these two young women. You know, they were in offices till 5 o'clock in the morning. They were accompanied to the toilet. They weren't allowed to carry pens. You know, there were details like that, weren't there? It was kind of... They're not in the film, you know, and it's horrific, you know, how they actually, you know, just steamrolled these
and
young
told
women.
you to get your own lawyer when you came to them to cite the abuse. I mean, that was very memorable, saying you're the one that needs to lawyer up, right?
And this is still what happens now.
Yeah.
This isn't something from the past.
First of all, I just wanted to just pay tribute to this film, and obviously to Can't Buy My Silence, which Time's Up is proud to support. I think what the film speaks so eloquently to is the testimony of courage of hundreds of thousands of women who speak up across all sectors about the daily abuse and bullying and harassment they experience. And what I believe is our imperative is to keep calling it out and to find ways of intervening, of which ending NDAs is absolutely a hugely important intervention. I also think not only is it the responsibility of government, but for any of us who are involved in companies to say we will not condone the use of NDAs wherever we are involved. And so I think what's really important about this film and this campaign is to ensure that wherever we are, whatever we do, whatever industry we are involved in, that we also speak up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a difference between a confidentiality clause and an NDA?
No, they are the same thing. My NDA was not called an NDA. Anything which is a confidentiality clause, which goes both ways, is an NDA.
So what do you make of that then? Why would you call it confidentiality clause and not an NDA?
Well, it's just obfuscation, you know.
It's exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Exactly, like non-consensual sex.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm very glad to be able to ask the last question tonight. Zelda, everybody, how would you like us to help?
In any way that you can. We need people to spread the word. We need people to write to their MPs. We need people who've got children at universities to get their children to ask their universities to sign the pledge not to use NDAs. We need people who are in academia to do that. We need money because we've been doing this totally out of our own pockets for the time being. We also need help with strategy, with social media, everything that you need to run an effective campaign. And I genuinely believe that this is something that we can achieve in the next 18 months. This isn't a campaign that I want to run for the next 15 years because I don't think it needs to. I think this is a very easy change to make. And when you actually explain to people, they want to make that change. So that's the help that I need, but there are many ways that people can help.
I think for those people in the audience who are in the business, I'd like there to be a time where, you know, obviously environmentally we're all kind of aware on set now of our environmental impact and recycling, and you can sign up to a thing that you get a stamp on your script and you're in this club kind of thing. I want there to be a similar thing to do with this. I want there to be, you know, film production companies, whether you're a huge company or a smaller company, to take it as a badge of honour that you are part of a movement and you adhere to if you like, a set of rules, and everybody that comes to work for you says, yeah, we agree with this, we believe in this. At the moment, I don't even know what that is and it doesn't exist, but that's what I hope moving forward, that we get to that safe space for all of us to work.
Thank you. Continue, so please don't go anywhere except for outside. Thank you all very much.